Hey, what's up? Today I am going to be penciling a panel in my comic book, The Realm Ethereal. What's going to be different about this is that I'm going to be using a piece of reference picture that I took. I can show you so far what I've drawn here. I've used reference for some of these here, mostly photos, combination of either a photograph of myself or like a picture I found online. But this one here, in this panel here, I'm going to show you something specifically that I'm going to do that I am going to be doing differently because I don't normally do this. So, and it's going to kind of be leading into a question of like tracing. So for the most part, when I'm doing these kind of images here, I don't really trace even if I have a photo, let's say of a face, because I generally prefer to have the kind of nuance that tends to happen when I'm penciling or drawing as I'm looking at a reference off to the side or on the screen. And there's just something about being able to draw a face, in particular a face, at least for me, that has that nuance when I'm drawing something and using a photo reference. But for drawing something like this in this panel here, and I'll show you a little bit about what I'm talking about, is I have this thumbnail here. Let me go ahead and see if I can show that. Thumbnail is really lightened up here. Okay, so there we go. So here in this thumbnail, if you can read this, or if you can't, this is a character lying down on the ground, kind of like a rock, with a opposing character above here, about to like shove a kind of like staff weapon kind of at his throat, upper chest area. So that was the concept. And what I ended up doing was taking several photos, in fact, but I'll show you the one I'm going to use, which is right here in my photo gallery, of using these art mannequins to help me pose and get the right angle. Because this is a tricky shot to draw. There's a couple things happening here. I want to get that worm's eye view. So down here is where the viewer's eye is going to be, eye level, or maybe it's actually about right here. But still, we're getting a view that is different than most panels or than most drawings I've done. And there's two characters here, so I wanted to have that reference and that I pose these here with these posable art mannequins. So going back to my artwork here in Procreate, this is the thumbnail. So I'm gonna get it set back to where it was before. I like to lighten the thumbnail here in Procreate. And then I also have a layer here where I am covering that so I can draw clearly. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull in that photo we just saw. What we do is we go to Canvas, go to Add, Insert a Photo. It opens up my gallery here. I've got tons of images that I use. And we'll pull that in. It's importing it into Procreate. And we can see it's quite huge. So, and it's in the background there, but the insert image, the layer shows up, the inserted image shows up on its own layer. So we're just going to bump that up here to just below the pencil layer. Okay, this is our photo reference. I'm going to size that down to the proper proportions that I'm going to want and the proper angle, or I should say proper rotation that I want to fit into the panel. And I think this is what I'm going to do right here. Okay. So that inserted image is underneath my pencil layer. So what I can do is now lower the opacity to where it's just barely showing the figures. The mannequins, I should say, in this case here. So I'm going to switch to my pencil tool, pencil brush, which I do have it set up there. And double checking that I have it set on the pencil layer, which again is where all these drawings are set up on. If you look, when I turn off that pencil layer, it disappears. And if you're wondering, I do also have a different layer for my borders, the straight panel, the straight edges here. And I think, where did that go? There we go. I should label that, the panel layer 4 here. Let's rename that border panels. Yeah, that'll work. Gets the job done. Okay, so back to pencil layer and talking about tracing here. So let's see, I may want just a little more opacity into that area. There you go. Let's try that. Go back to our pencil layer, and then let's go ahead and start drawing here. So the reason why I'm doing this here is because I'm thinking that it's going to make it a lot easier for me to get just the angle without having to spend too much time having to figure out like how to draw. Like what I mean by too much time actually is by drawing, referencing the image. So I'm going to kind of sketch over this just to get like the essential positioning of the bodies. And as I'm working on this, the thing about the mannequins is they are a great tool to have, but they're not entirely accurate in terms of maybe the muscles itself, or kind of like the shape I want to give, or if I want to exaggerate things. But for the most part, it's a pretty good starting point. And the other thing too is this is a comic book page, and I am really trying to get this page completed, and this is just going to be another tool to help me in the process of what is ultimately the goal is to get this page completed, so I can move on to the next stage, which will be inking, and then ultimately coloring, and then lettering the story on there. So already there's some wonky things happening here with the delts, because again, this is just it's just an inanimate object. It's a toy. It's a mannequin that is good for, again, getting just kind of the bones of the scene set up here. It's not going to be something that I'm gonna stick with in terms of like the finalized. Like that's just weird looking there. But again, the neck, how it transitions into the trap. And again, this is just a toy. It's a mannequin. It kind of gives me that rough beginning to just start to lay down the elements, which in this case are the figures. And then I'll go through later and have to find other reference to go ahead and really make sure that the detail within what I'm seeing in the bodies here, these mannequins, is going to look pleasing. Yeah, and it will look correct. So like right away, that neck just looks kind of weird. So I'm going to have to find a picture of a model here of some sort that will allow me to get this kind of an angle, and I'll probably fudge parts of it to get it to rotate and turn. But again, this is just a really good way just to block in the artwork and get it into the page, onto the page, and then get moving on to the next stage. So right here, there are a couple of things that I'm going to omit for now, like the hands. I will go ahead and probably just reference my own hands and take pictures and pose them differently. This foot here can probably stay the way it is. Now, one of the critical things about this particular reference that I'm using is the action actually takes place on a kind of like a rock. And what I have here is actually, I think it's a t-shirt that I've just crumpled up, one of my t-shirts, to act as that mound or that rock, to give the characters that grounding onto this piece of this environment that they're on. Because again, he is, and it's kind of like a slope to it. So this is the reason why we have this character lying back and down, and this character is standing above, and the action ensues. So getting back to this drawing here, this is another critical part, is making sure that I've got, again, a pretty good reference or a good idea of how the characters would actually lay down in the space, the environment, and their surroundings, to create that believable grounding or connection to their environment. So let's go on to this character here. Again, the body here is, again, it's a good starting point. It's not entirely accurate in terms of like the build of the character. Although this character does tend to run a little leaner. This is the character Core, K-O-R, one of my ethereals, who is kind of getting into it here with Ohm, another ethereal. And so I will no doubt go back and really kind of play up or get more detailed with the body. But for now, this is just a really good starting point just to give me some good sense of perspective and the angle, all that fun stuff. And basically, and I should say more importantly, having the figures in space with a good reference to each other and their environment while being able to get at least a good block in. And in this case, I am tracing, but trust me, like, there's going to be a ton more work that I'm going to need to do after the fact that I'm tracing here, beyond the fact of what I'm doing, which is tracing. So I trace when it makes sense. I don't always trace, but I definitely do use my fair share amount of reference. And as I go through this, I will just refine it. Now, one of the big parts about this, one of the most important things I should say about getting these mannequins set up this way, is I had to have a pretty good handle on what's happening here, which is this character needs to be holding this spear-like kind of relic item, which this character wrestled away from this character here, and show it in the correct angle and have it be a critical component of what's happening in the composition and what's happening in the story. So again, what I am most relying upon is the angle of the characters, so I can draw this part right here, which is going to be this spear, kind of like this again, I describe it as a spear. It's not really a spear, but it is something that is just as critical as making sure that by posing these mannequins in this manner, I have a pretty good reference in how to get this critical part of the story, how to get it down and place it, in position. So what this basically is the first step in getting to have this page or this panel and the action in there start to come together. So let me turn off the inserted image, which is the photo of the characters, or the photo reference of the mannequins, as I now look at the characters here. And what's great about this, obviously, is from this point I can play with the characters. I'm already seeing that I'm going to want to adjust this character slightly. He looks kind of short and squat, and that's kind of what happens with photos. They are distorted. They don't see the world the way our eyes see the world, and that can, for better or worse, that can be a good thing or that could be a bad thing. But for me, it just gives me pause to just take a look at what I've drawn and then go back and refine it. And so what I'm doing now is I'm actually moving what I've drawn, just tucking it, moving it down slightly, lowering it, so I can maybe adjust this character. And I'm seeing here that I may want to make this character just a touch bigger. And I do all that as I'm working on this and trying to figure out all the details in terms of like what are the proportions of the character, how do I want to angle this. Like if I wanted to, I could take the characters here that I've drawn and we can do this kind of rotation. That doesn't make sense, but just showing you what can be done, or this kind of rotation. I think the rotation I had was fine. I just need to make adjustments with regards to how much space I want to leave, because there does need to be dialogue around here, around the characters in this panel. And these are the things that you just work on. So like there's some weird stuff happening here, like I said, kind of like with the neck area and the head. I'm gonna have to get some reference for this here. The pecs here, they don't quite sit well with me, and the rib cage and probably and the lat area, the back needs to be a little bigger. And there are just some aesthetic things that I want to make sure that I am able to, and I will correct and adjust as I move forward. But beyond this point here, or up to this point here, again, having those mannequins are really important because they really do help me to set up the scene. These mannequins that I use, I've had them for a few years, and ever since digital came out, like digital models, I do use those a little bit more. But for a quick setup in doing something like this, those art mannequins are killer. They're awesome. So after this, I'm just gonna go ahead and keep tightening the details on it, but just wanted to show you how I go about and add or make use of my mannequins here, my art mannequins, and just how they can really just help out in a pinch. just kind of what I think this reference was, is I started to draw the panel in my head, out of my head, and then it just wasn't turning out. I got the concept down, but this photo reference here with the mannequins just really helped to bring me closer to what that should look like. And then from here, it lands on the page. And as I said before, I'll just refine it and keep going on and hopefully get this page done a lot faster just because I did use that reference. Thanks for watching. Catch you in another video.